Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today for a very special edition of MMF Connect. Thank you for joining us today as we celebrate International Women's Day. So before we hear from MMF leadership from across North America, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that MMF Canada's operations are based in Toronto, which is part of Treaty 13. And this is also the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee. And is currently home to diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, as well as non-status Indigenous folks. So, like many Canadian arts organizations, MMF Canada offers a land acknowledgement at the start of all of our events. And for me personally, that's a moment to get reconnected to one of MMF Canada's mandates, which is to create an equitable music industry for all. But today, I'm saying it, I want to just take a minute to salute and consider and reflect on the countless contributions, many of which none of us will ever know about, of women and female identifying folks from oppressed communities. So many Black women, Indigenous women, women of color have done the labor of fighting for equality at work, in the home, and politically. And I think that today on International Women's Day, we should be dedicating our energy and thoughts and special events towards those people. So thank you for being here. And speaking of leaders, I'm very proud to introduce MMF Canada's Executive Director, Amy Therrien.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on International Women's Day today. And Andrea, thanks so much for starting off the meeting with those words, getting us rolling in a good way here. So I'm Amy Therrien, the Executive Director of MMF Canada, and shortly we'll hear MMF leaders from across North America. But we are quite similar in that we're fighting to create a stronger industry through supporting music managers and self-managed artists. And so we do that in a number of ways. So as MMF Canada, we host these monthly Connect events to help bring people together. We also provide professional development webinars and through master classes. And as things continue to open up, we'll in person at events to learn and just to keep everyone connected and on top of the latest trends in the industry. And so now I am going to pass things over to Nita to bring some welcoming words from MMF US.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy. Hi, everyone. I'm Nita Raghawansi, President of MMF US. We are the 29-year-old trade association for artist managers and self-managed artists. And it's such an honor to be here. I love when we get together as North America and get to have some cross-pollination going of our group. So I really enjoy this. And as Amy said, we're very similar in the activities that Amy just mentioned. We do educational panels, we do advocacy work, we work on behalf of finding business solutions for our artist manager and self-managed artist membership. And we are a growing and active community of thousands now on our list of the MMF US community. So we're very excited for each and every one of you to engage with us and connect with us at mmfus.com. We are kicking off on March 30th with what we call the MMF US Roadshow, where we're going to do one-day summits in 7 different cities in the US, kicking off March 30th in Los Angeles. So just wanted to let you all know, if you find yourselves in LA, Miami, Nashville, Chicago, Austin, Atlanta, or New York. I think I got all 7. Anyway, please do check us out. We'll put the events up on our website and on our socials so that you can participate, and they're free and open to everyone. So anyway, nice to meet you all, and I look forward to the rest of this. And now I'm passing it over to my fabulous colleague, Ms. Anna Rodriguez. Hello, Anna.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here. Welcome to our MMF Connect North America session. As representative of our umbrella organization, the IMMF, based in Luxembourg and with representation in more than 60 countries, and also here as the MMF Mexico, one of the three amigos present here, I must emphasize that the value of our association is in its members, and including these kinds of actions, bringing together events like this. The MMF Mexico, it's been together only for a few months. We are really excited to be participating with MMF US and MMF Canada for these sessions. We're looking forward to putting a lot more structure into our music industry in Mexico, which is huge and brings a lot to the world. But I think we had this pending task of getting together and well organized. And that's one of the things that the pandemic left as an opportunity to us. So I see that there are members of MMF Mexico here present with us. So I hope that you can meet them after we have our speakers talk with us. And just to finish, I would like to also remember that the economy of music is not just about jobs and secondary business. It's about protection of this powerful tool for well-being and social good. So for this reason, having with us this afternoon two women of incredible intelligence, and that with their daily work, they contribute to building a more equitable field in the music industry, it's really a privilege. So Cherie and Kristin, I can't wait to hear from you. Thank you very much for being here. Thanks to Nita, and thank you MMF Canada for making this possible.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm going to assume people can hear and see me and see us all right. If not, let us know in chat. But yeah, super excited to be here with you, Kristin, and to have what should be super interesting, very wide-ranging fireside chat. I think I guess for context, I don't know how much info people got ahead of time, but we're both founders of our own music and tech companies. And so what we thought would be really great to focus on today is more of our own respective entrepreneurial journeys in the music industry, like how we are thinking about like scoping out music tech opportunities, what like highs and lows we run into as founders, what advice you might have for other people from like the founder perspective, but also in terms of just like things in music tech that we're excited about. So those would be the focal points for today. Should we start with introductions? I think it would be great just to walk everyone through, I guess, our respective journeys and like how we got here and what we're up to right now. If you want to go first, Kristin.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a great idea. And when Cherie and I were, talking about the best way to go about this, we thought that we would just, jump back and forth with questions, and we would both dive into it in a range of different topics that would benefit, everyone here on the call, and also that we would like to share. So happy to be here as well. But so a little bit of background about me and how I ended up at this point. It's definitely been a long journey for me personally. So I'll try not to make it too long-winded, but I've been in the music industry for about 10 years. Started with a master's in music and business, released a Grammy-nominated record for an artist named Barrington Levy. Realized that I didn't have the information that I needed to make as informed marketing decisions as I could have for his campaign. So I identified a problem and really started from there. Managed global playlist strategies at Universal Music Group, and then left there and started Westcott. While I was at Universal, and I saw a problem that was rampant across labels of the music industry, which was that there were a ton of missed opportunities happening across catalog music. And it was mostly because the people in charge didn't have access to the information they needed to make informed marketing decisions across all of this catalog, because they're focused on other things. It's hard to manage hundreds of and thousands of artists at a time. So when I started Westcott, we started as a roster analysis report, and identified that when labels were spending money on marketing, it wasn't aligned with when people were streaming the music. And so we made a modest model to say what would be the impact on revenue if labels spent when people were listening to the music. And we saw a 20% increase across all the revenue streams related to that artist at the label, also on the management arm as well, across ticketing and merch. And so from there, we evolved to Westcott, which is an automated advertising platform that pays for catalog music, viral TikTok videos, a South by Southwest performance, or the fact that it's Christmas. So that's kind of the evolution of how I got to where I am today. What about you, Cherie?
Amazing. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing, Kristin. I have also been working in music and tech for my whole career for the last like 5 to 6 years, but from I guess a relatively different vantage point of media. So for my whole professional career, I've been writing about the intersection of music and tech and business in particular. So I started in 2015 writing as a contributor for publications like Forbes and Billboard, Music Business Worldwide, a lot of entertainment and business publications, trying to analyze how technology was impacting the music business. So everything from the biggest streaming services like Spotify and Apple, which had just launched that same year. So the whole discussion around like big tech's role in streaming was changing, to something that I am still super enthusiastic about today, which is the role of startups. So like what was drawing founders to the music industry, what kind of interesting problems they were solving and why. I've always taken a very not like news-driven approach, but analysis-driven approach, always trying to track trends on like a higher level, trying to connect the dots among a lot of different trends that are happening across any area of music and tech, whether that's recorded music, live music, artist branding, etc. So I was a freelancer in more traditional sense for 2 to 3 years, launched my own paid newsletter dedicated to the topic in 2019, and launched it on Patreon and ran it on Patreon for a couple of years. And over the last 6 months, been going through a very rapid transition of moving and expanding from not just being a solo newsletter, but also experimenting more with Web3 and crypto. So I'm essentially building out Water Music into becoming more of like a collaborative research collective. I don't know how many people here are familiar with Discord. There are actually a couple of Water Music members I recognize in the audience, which is very cool to see. But we have a community in our Discord server, and we've been putting together a lot of really in-depth collaborative reports on emerging music tech trends. Our latest one is actually rolling out this week. We just published the latest chapter in our report earlier today, focused on music Web3 platform onboarding and marketing strategies. So still keeping a focus on emerging tech and how that impacts the business of music, but also now in a much more collaborative and collective way. And that's definitely has been something that has driven my work from the very beginning, is trying to break down information silos, trying to help the music and tech worlds understand each other better, trying to serve through writing as a translator between those two worlds, and hopefully encouraging more innovative collaborations there. So yeah, that's what brings me here.
That's awesome. Now, just for some of the people who are in the audience who are newer to Discord servers, Dows, NFTs, how would you define a Discord server and an NFT in relation to how it's being used for Water Music?
For sure. Yeah. Let's see how, I guess, concisely I can explain this. So, I guess Web3, people here may or may not be familiar, it just refers to, I guess, the ecosystem of technologies that use the blockchain, which is a decentralized ledger where all transactions are made totally public, and there's no one centralized server or person or entity that controls that network. So there's been a lot of discussion over the last like 5 to 10 years about that applying to the music industry for like rights and metadata, rights and like crediting data, for example. How I'm incorporating that into Water Music, which is a media operation and research operation, is a bit different. We are still using the blockchain, but it's more for the use case of building a community that has a sense of shared ownership through some community token. We actually, part of this report that we're releasing this week is about like the nebulousness of how you define the organizational structures that like result out of that, but a term that people have used is a decentralized autonomous organization, DAO. And historically, what that is referred to is just an organization where, especially when it comes to like capital and deployment of capital in a company, I'm just looking at the chat, it is quite similar to a cooperative, and that no capital can be deployed without some kind of democratic like decision-making or consensus from people in the group. And so we're using tokens as kind of a coordination mechanism to incentivize and then crowdsource a lot of the research that we're doing, kind of build our community from there. And also just reward people who even like seed early ideas to our research or help us gather data. So rewarding diverse kinds of work, I guess, in our research. And then in terms of like NFTs, that's used as a funding mechanism to help support our contributors and fund our research as well.
Awesome. And to add to that a little bit, and then I can dive into a little bit about how a bit more explanation to Westcott to add on to your explanation. But, when I signed up for Water and Music DAO, essentially I get access to a channel similar to a Slack channel. And because I am a member, I can now make decisions when they get displayed to the audience. So if Cherie were to ask us, what is the next, article topic that we want to hear about, people can vote, and those votes can have an impact on, what topics people focus on, or, other things like that. So it's nice because we get to be a part of the conversation, especially as the music industry in general is rapidly changing and is going to rapidly change over the next decade. A lot of the research work that you're doing will, help inform companies like mine, as well as managers and artists, of kind of where to focus on. So it's fun that we get to be a part of that conversation now.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, Brody, who has been very involved in this latest report and is in the audience right now, actually just shared a link in chat for people who are interested to more context in our report. But yes, I totally forgot to explain Discord, but people have drawn comparisons to early internet forums, actually, I guess, of which just connecting music fans was like the earliest use case. I think it is a very similar dynamic, not just with building communities, but in Water Music context. Also, again, like breaking down information silos, something I've also taken very seriously from the very beginning of my career is making sure that whatever articles I put out has some kind of actionable and useful tie to people's day-to-day work and careers. So by the time they finish reading an article, they have a new perspective on an area they're working with directly, like in music and tech, and or are able to make smarter decisions about it. And just having direct access to your readership and your community from like a media perspective, whether that's Discord or any other kind of forum or chat app of your choice, has been super helpful and just made our work a lot stronger. And I think there are a lot of ties to like artist and music communities and how they're evolving as well.
No, absolutely. I guess to dive in and give a little bit more background on Westcott and how we've evolved. Essentially, how it works is a label, a manager, an artist, an investment firm that invested in catalog, or a publishing company can onboard to the platform we connect their streaming data feeds from their distributor. So that could be through kind of the Orchard or Entertainment Intelligence or the Spotify bulk API. Or if the label has access or the artist has access to that data themselves, we pull that information in and we combine that with industry and data point from Chartmetric, from TikTok to radio to playlist placements, all the way to bands in town information. So we pull in all of this information to tell us when social media, when are people paying attention, and we combine that with consumption data. And then our algorithms based on the stage that the artist is at, the market that the audience is in, and the genre that the artist is, we identify the most engaged moments. And when we identify a moment, we're able to extract from the consumption data high-level audience information, like the age range, the male, female, region, country, and combine that with other interests, and then send a hyper-targeted ad within 24 hours on Facebook and Instagram, growing streaming data, growing followers. Our ads are driving playlist placements, driving chart placements. And so that's kind of how we've evolved today. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, there's like a through line, which maybe we can like shift to, I guess, higher level question about how to like scope opportunities in music and tech. I mean, a through line I think that we're both tackling in different, very parallel ways is just transparency and like sifting through noise and like helping, I guess in your case, helping artists and their teams and labels navigate otherwise just like super noisy landscape. It's like actually very interesting to hear from my side as someone like going deep into crypto, deep into Web3. It's like there's a lot of exciting stuff there. At the same time, there's this like very basic kind of marketing foundation that is like still missing from so much of the music industry in terms of like artist understanding of like who's consuming their music, who's engaging with it, etc. So I guess to like generalize that a bit, maybe we can both share. I guess you shared a little bit about how you arrived at this idea based on your work at a major label for the startup. But in general, for people who are listening who might be like thinking about their own music tech idea or just trying to navigate a very fast moving landscape, any particular like piece of advice you would have for them or guidance in terms of like where the biggest opportunities are right now?
Where the biggest opportunities are? Yeah, for sure. I think that for me, the way that I identify opportunities and always have from a startup perspective has been where are the problems, and then I follow the trail of acquisitions. And so in the music, at the music industry, I think it was around 2019, all of the major labels were acquiring third-party playlist companies because they viewed them as like out of online radio stations. So Universal acquired Digson, Warner and Sony acquired Topsify and Filter. And that was just an example, and it moved into companies acquiring, voice detection and then AI companies. And so I've always followed the music industry in terms of where the string of acquisitions. So that's kind of where I go in terms of following the opportunities. I'm curious, what about yourself? Because you have a wide range of, you look at the industry from a 360 lens. So I'm sure it would be easy to get overwhelmed with, well, it's all exciting, but how do you narrow your focus and sink your teeth into one or two?
Yeah, in terms of like narrowing focus, always a challenge, but in terms of like figuring out which like trends are worth covering, I recently was reminded of this concept of multiple discovery, which is a more like it's more maybe academic or scientific term, but it's the thesis that for any let's say in like a scientific context, for example, for any like Nobel Prize winning scientific discovery, there were probably like 10 to 15 other teams that arrived at that discovery at the exact same time. It was just like a timing issue, or like the specific discovery this person made, the way it was presented, that like led them to this prize. So it's a general thesis that if a problem is compelling or groundbreaking enough, there are multiple people working on it at the same time. And that is something that I noticed a lot when I first entered the music tech world from a writing perspective. I was just doing research on startups that had like raised funding. I think, not a marker of like future success necessarily, but a very strong signal of interest. So like startups that have raised funding, or that were like launching new products, and a lot of them were looking very similar, but there was no resource or no person who was connecting the dots and trying to synthesize, like why that was happening, or why that multiple discovery was happening. So that's been a really big signal for me, and that's driven, a ton of, I think, my most involved pieces from the last couple of years, especially, whether that is live streaming, which I think that was like very visibly a problem that so many people were trying to tackle, especially in like 2020, 2021, or like paid membership models, like fan community apps. A lot of them kind of came up during the pandemic, but there was no resource trying to draw a through line in terms of like kinds of features they were building, what gaps were still existing in the market to like help artists better build their communities. And then now with the music crypto world, which is just super noisy, and just like any level of like critical thinking, I think just like goes a really long way. So from like from a writing standpoint, and then hopefully in a way that helps, actually helps people who read water music stuff, that's been a main driver for me.
That's awesome. I think one thing I'd add on my end as well, if I think about how I would go about discovering opportunities for artists within my catalog, one of the things that has come up for Westcott is, I think everybody has access to daily stream data for Spotify for artists. And so one of the things that we look at to identify opportunities with stream data is, the rate of streams over a 3-day rolling average, for example. It's one of the ways we can slice and dice the information. And what we're actually realizing is that the stage of the artist and the genre of the artist, as well as the market that you're targeting, impacts the window of time that's most valuable to identify the spike. So for example, a catalog artist, like a jazz catalog artist like Wayman Tisdale, who's not around anymore, the window of time in which you need to look for the rate of streams over a rolling average might be 7 days versus 3 days. And so that's one thing that's kind of popped up, is how would we use data to identify opportunities across our catalog. You really need to take into consideration artist context when determining how you're calculating that spike or identifying that opportunity.
Context is one of my favorite words, personally. It is so important. I mean, this is just this might be a really simple and like obvious point, but I've definitely, like, any company, any startup, any like artist team member that's like trying to push a certain kind of model as like the right way for like all artists, or like any career stage, immediate red flag for me. Yeah, it definitely like makes discussions about music and tech more complex and like nuanced maybe, but I think importantly nuanced in terms of like what works for one artist like certainly, or does not necessarily work for another artist, and totally different market, totally different genre, career stage. Again, very obvious, but just like very important to reiterate that. So yeah, very glad you brought that up.
I'm curious, as a artist or manager, in your opinion, what do you see as the best way to navigate the current environment with all of these new technologies available? What would kind of your recommendation be?
Yeah, I can speak best. So I've never manage an artist. So just like full disclaimer, I like can't speak from direct experience from that. I can definitely speak from my experience, like writing about the landscape from a higher level, and then also like figuring out what business models make most sense for me. Like as I went through my journey, like launching our Patreon page, and like now going to this Web3 world. Again, maybe simple or obvious, but underrated idea is like not letting the tech dictate your strategy. Like I think your like strategy and your values should always lead first. So for example, again, like very maybe simple, but I think ultimately has been very consequential for how water music has evolved. I've paid basically nothing for like paid advertising. Like that is just not a part of like water music's like growth strategy currently. And also, so our revenue comes almost entirely from paid monthly or annual memberships, like memberships. And we like don't take ads either from like outside brands. And that's been like, I've seen in like the media, in like the wider media world, of course, with like the biggest brands, advertising is a super important part of their business model. But in terms of the values that I wanted to instill from the very beginning, it was like all about community building, all about having like an independent voice and kind of building a community around that voice, and then fitting the business model to that. Not just like pursuing whatever was the like hottest trend. Actually, like a very good recent example that I'm sure many artist teams will relate to. We've like briefly considered, briefly considered having like a TikTok presence for like water music, but that just like does not really make sense like for us, even though TikTok is like the the platform for a lot of different like people, artists, or like creators. But I definitely take the stance that if it doesn't make sense for your business goals, for your like values as an artist in terms of the like brand you're trying to build, the community you're trying to build, certainly don't feel like you have to like conform to a certain platform. So it's a pretty high level, I guess, piece of advice, but something that especially as the tech landscape moves super quickly, like you don't know what platforms are going to stick around 3, 5, 10 years from now. I think being consistent with the values first and foremost will like push you in the right direction.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think on my end, in terms of how I found out about different technologies through water and music, through different online forums, through Ari's Take. Recently, I have also actually, but even before that, I was looking at Techstars Music and looking at Y Combinator to see the companies that were coming out of there, because I love latching on to new startups that can fit and support myself as a business. And I look at each artist as their own brand, as their own business. And so I personally, for me, I think to what you said, I choose technologies that support the way that I learn and my outcomes in my day. So, my suite of tools can range from, Airtable to Google Suite, and then we can go into the software rabbit hole of Jira and GitHub and all of that. And obviously those technologies will differ for an artist, from Spotify Artist Insights to Bandcamp, to different, to Patreon, to different platforms. I find that when you're staring at a lot of options, for me, it comes down to, I'm an audio and visual learner. I've built the product to be accessible to audio and visual learners because I feel like that's a big learning styles within the creative industries at large. And so the UX UI, the front end design of a software, really matters to me. If I had to decide between Excel or Airtable, it would be Airtable all day. Because for some, I can work more efficiently on it because of how it's presented and how intuitive it is. So that's kind of really what I look for in supporting my workflow versus taking it over, making it more complicated. If it's making me stressed, it gets turned off.
I can definitely relate to the Airtable part, especially. But yeah, it's just as, you know, an artist, you would navigate like a brand partnership or deciding like who to do a deal with, just period. I think tech is certainly no exception in terms of like what platforms you adopt. Just looking through the chat as well, and then maybe this can be, unless we like have more time, like the last like higher level trend question, then we can move to like founder experience, because I think a lot of people here would appreciate that. Someone asked about the metaverse, and I guess looking at the last week, I have not seen a piece of news confuse the entire music industry as much as this Bandcamp Epic Games acquisition. So I think like with that piece of news, the like relevance or lack thereof of like the metaverse is top of mind for a lot of people, especially given how I guess how influential Bandcamp is in the independent and like DIY music world. So yeah, I'd be curious. I don't know how much you see like what you're doing interacting with that world from like maybe like a data perspective or fan engagement perspective, but what are your prospects on that world, like the metaverse, as it relates to the music industry?
I have to admit, I'm a bit of a newbie when it comes to the metaverse in the music industry. I know I can go as far as kind of a holographic concerts, but I'd love to actually throw that question back at you to glean off of what you have to say, because I know that's more of your laneway.
Sure. Yeah, I will give the TLDR, like very brief lowdown of what I'm thinking.
We're all very excited.
Yeah, metaverse is an interesting concept. I don't have like, I mean, and similar to like Web3, similar to Dows, many different competing definitions of what the metaverse is, like exist on the internet right now. But a core part of it for me is being able to have like, I guess like both fundamental and like a visual identity that you carry with you wherever you, in whatever space you're in, both like online and offline. So I think maybe the most like commercially loud or like successful example that a lot of people say are these like emotes or skins in Fortnite. So like if you're Travis Scott or if you're Ariana Grande, any other celebrity, you know, being able to not just have like a offline or real world identity, but also a digital identity that you can bring into games like Fortnite and like build a business around in terms of people being able to buy like custom skins, or you know, tons of artists have built their own worlds in Minecraft and like build their own digital identities there. So I think that's kind of the core of what makes the metaverse like exciting to people. What is definitely concerning is, I think, like the centralization of the metaverse. There are these like two opposing camps, and maybe I'll just like leave it there, just make people aware of this debate, which I think is very important in terms of like what Bandcamp's future looks like, for example. So like there's a very like crypto forward view of the metaverse where no one company owns the metaverse. Like there are multiple metaverses. People can kind of build their own worlds, you know, using whatever technologies they want and build these like niche communities in that way. There's also, of course, a very centralized model where I'm still going to say Facebook, even though they like, I guess officially have changed their name to Meta, but like they are building the epitome of a centralized vision of the metaverse, or like how we interact with each other online in the future. Epic Games is like absolutely going in that direction as well. So yeah, it's like, I think it is still very early to see what's going to happen, but there are those two like very opposing camps that will come to a head soon, largely because of these acquisitions that Epic is making, these like independent marketplaces. So that's kind of that's what's top of mind for me, and that's the angle that I think from which I'll be covering that topic through Water Music or elsewhere also.
Awesome. I love that. So just to kind of step out a little bit and just, highlight both of our entrepreneurial journey and touch a little bit, lift the hood and look underneath a little bit on that. I'm curious, what has been over the past few years that you've built out Water and Music, and it has evolved from just a newsletter to now a DAO, and evolving with new technologies available. What the high and low of the experience overall in your mind?
Yeah, it's very difficult for me personally to pinpoint highs and lows of like very specific moments. I think highs and lows for me, looking at so now my timeline is like the last 2 years, which is kind of crazy to think about, like since the pandemic first started in March 2020. Definitely a low point for me, like personally, was actually like a year into the pandemic, when like new waves were coming in and like lockdowns were coming back around the world, and like just feeling like we were stuck in the sense of like purgatory forever, which like especially from the vantage point of like trying to build your own company, I feel like I've like artists especially must have felt this to like a whole other level from what I was experiencing day to day. I like can't even imagine, but definitely from like an entrepreneurs, like founders, like standpoint, that was a general low point of like trying to get through that period. And timing, as with like so many things, plays a huge role. But I kind of found what's the right word? Or like I found, so the high for me has definitely been the last 6 months of this transition into experimenting more with Web3. And of course, people will like have a wide range of experiences with the technology. There are tons of like scammy platforms out there, like scammy tokens out there. Totally understand. But like my experience, at least in like the cultural sphere, has been it's a very thoughtful and like safe space for experimentation. And I guess I thought my role previously as a writer, writing about music and tech, my role was just to like sit from the outside and like critique things and like overthink things. Whereas like now I feel like the mindset I'm very much in, and that you have to really be in to survive, I think, in this like Web3 landscape, is just to constantly experiment, not be afraid to fail and like see what doesn't work. So that's like a mental block that I've been able to still in the process of surpassing, I think, as a founder. But kind of with Web3 is like the technical substrate. That generally is a high for me. Like now I've gone through the experience of like launching a token and like trying to start this decentralized autonomous organization or a DAO, and like very complex work. But as long as you like, approach it thoughtfully, the general community or ecosystem is like very welcoming. So yeah, I'll say that's like, again, not a single moment, but general high for me is like comfort with experimentation and like rapid iteration, and like really leaning into that as opposed to just like covering it from the outside. So yeah, those are my answers. Very definitely curious to hear about yours as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that, and I love those answers. I sympathize and understand. I think on my end, one of the highs of the company was getting our first customer, providing them the roster analysis report, and then having that customer see value and be one of the customers to pay us to build the prototype. I'd say that was one of my biggest top highs. In that same period, I think was one of the lowest lows was, at that time, it was a solo founder. And so I think decision fatigue was one of my lows. Was, doing this, phenomenal report, diving into all of these insights, having all of these multiple epiphanies that, sit on the back of 5 years of research in the space, sitting on different seats, and then having it all click, made me realize that most of my friends and family will get tired about hearing about music data at some point. And so, you know, that has, I guess, another high for me too, is that experience for me has evolved into building an amazing team that is, you know, very focused, that can talk about the epiphanies with me all day. So yeah.
I love that. Like having building the path to epiphanies like as your job. That is ideal. Yes. Love that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's so many vantage points, whether or not you're a writer or you're a manager, or you're an artist, or you work at a digital distribution company, or you work in MMF. All of these vantage points are so valuable when they come together, and that's why I love conversations like this so much. And I'm curious if anyone, I don't know if we're allowed to open up the floor to any questions or anything, or if you had any more questions for me, Cherie, and vice versa.
Yeah, I am totally, I've been monitoring the chat, looking at questions. I think someone submitted, okay, there are a couple of Web3 related questions. I'm also wary of the time. I don't know how much time we have. Maybe I'll look in the chat just for like signal from the MMF team, but definitely more than happy to answer these questions. Fine for time. Okay, cool. Someone asked a question of what fundamentally differentiates Dows from ICOs of yesteryear. Great question. Without a strong like source of value or sense of like mission or community, I would say nothing. There are a lot of like very scammy or like sketchy DAOs that are out there. Lots of sketchy like social tokens out there. People here may be familiar with some like names of artists who essentially, so for people who may not be familiar, ICO stands for initial coin offering. And what a lot of artists and celebrities and influencers did around like 2017, 2018 is they would launch their own crypto token and just make a lot of promises that ultimately were unfulfilled. So there's like a big artist who launched a token and was like, if you hold this token, you'll get a percentage of like all my streaming income for the next like 5 years. But there's no like actual technical basis for that. And that is the basis of a scam. Like, you know, you make a promise, but you don't deliver on it, or you're unable to fulfill it, and you're duping in this case like your very diehard sensitive fans. So it's like certainly possible for anyone to like use crypto in a similarly disingenuous way. I think with music DAOs, so I'll give like a very brief overview of part of a report that we released at Water Music yesterday, very in-depth report on the state of like music DAOs. So there are a lot of actually indie labels, names of which like many of you might recognize, like Leaving Records. They're experimental electronic indie label based in LA. Top Shelf Records as well, more like indie alt rock leaning label. So both of those labels are experimenting with DAOs, not to like scale a token the way that people might think about in like the normal crypto world, but it's more about creating like shared sources of capital and financing for communities that need it. So there's a spinoff of Top Shelf Records called Zone. They're a, I guess, burgeoning music DAO, and they're trying to build public goods style tech tools for just any music community. And like by public goods meaning being able to be used for free by any community. And they're thinking about like tools for like alternatives to streaming and curation and like paying artists for recorded music specifically. So that area of DAOs, so like not just trying to maximize the value of the token, but also create like just shared capital for these communities and like sustaining those communities. I'm more excited about that world, or I'm like more drawn to that world than maybe other DAOs that have more like explicitly financial incentives. That's my answer to that. And then maybe one more question. How do you reconcile the tech world's mantra on Web3 being direct deal oriented and the fact that all these significant repertoire, both in music publishing and masters, is owned by companies? This is a great question. I'm also wary of like taking up audience Q&A. So Kristin, if you have any like thoughts on.
Go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, this is a super important question. And I think 2022 will actually be a major inflection point in terms, because so the Web3, the more Web3 native music world takes a very open, you could say like more, yeah, like radically open approach to copyright and IP. There's a lot of talk about using like Creative Commons licenses, for example. So there's like no stickler, you know, like if I release NFT, you should, as long as you like credit the artist, you should feel free to use it however you want. So there's like definitely a lot of like remix culture, derivative culture, like free-flowing IP in that world. For sure that it's not meshed well with like very traditional copyright frameworks and the way that labels normally pursue deals with tech platforms. And for now, it's been interesting to see. Yeah, so like major labels, if you look at like news announcements from the last year, they've invested a lot of capital into NFT platforms, but have yet to actually release a lot of their own music. And so where I see NFTs like meshing with the major label world maybe is more from like an artist branding perspective, as opposed to monetizing like the recorded music side. And I'm just looking at the question again of like Web3 being direct deal oriented, for sure. And I think this is like a net positive thing that if you look at like NFT sales, for example, absolutely vast majority of money is going to independent artists or like unsigned artists, because they're able to move a lot more nimbly because they're not tied down to like third-party rights holders, or they're not tied down to very stringent like recording or publishing deals. So in terms of like, yeah, the more direct nature of Web3 certainly is concentrated in the independent world. And the market is growing quickly enough that major labels are going to want to come in, but it's been interesting, like even after like a year and a half, they've been moving like very cautiously. I think part of it is that blockchain and like traditional copyright frameworks just really don't mesh well together. Whole several hour discussion there. But yeah, Kristin, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add to that or any other thoughts.
I would just echo what you said, honestly, in that vein. And it looks like another, Monica also noted that my point is it can't be both, and the tech people need to start looking at Web3 in a more real way. What are your thoughts on kind of that point?
Yeah, might need a bit more clarification on what that comment means. Tech people need to start looking at Web3 in a real way. I mean, what that brings to mind, certainly we can use more like Web3 realists. So like I would consider myself like a Web3 realist. Not, I guess the term that a lot of people throw around for DAOs is like DAO maximalism. Like everything has to be decentralized in terms of like how decisions are made. I certainly don't think that's true, especially when you get into more like areas of more like creative decisions or like curatorial decisions. There's like a lot more nuance in that. Just looking at,
I guess from a high level,
yeah,
you know, a question, stepping back quickly, you know, a question that I have would be, you know, how would you define Web3 in general? Does it equal crypto? Does it equal NFT? Does it equal DAOs? Does it equal anything having to do with crypto and kind of the new framework in that way? Or how would you define it?
Big question. I'll do my best to define it. So everything that you said, crypto, NFTs, DAOs, they're all implementations of what I see as like Web3 technology. I mentioned earlier this concept of a blockchain, which is a decentralized ledger of like transactions or of data that is it's decentralized in the sense that anyone can, I guess, like access the data on that network. It's not centralized, it's not siloed. Like you can look up Ethereum is the biggest blockchain, and you can like very transparently see the distribution of who owns Water Music's tokens now. And like you could very transparently see like how much money we have in our crypto treasury currently, and any like deployment of capital from that treasury is, I guess there's also like a governance aspect for DAOs specifically, but it's like we're gonna have to transparently make that decision just for like the sake of accountability. So yeah, so I guess at the core of Web3 is this fundamental unit of like a blockchain ledger that can store like data, it could be like metadata or like financial data, and that just being mutable or unchangeable and then available to the wider public in a much more transparent way. Hopefully, there's definitely a need for like a Web3 fundamentals tutorial at some point for sure in the industry. But that is, I guess, the way that I would define it. And yeah, as opposed to like having to rely on centralized platforms. A core part of it also is having a decentralized identity. So, okay, that's actually very relevant for artists. Like imagining being able to have a platform agnostic identity as opposed to like different profiles on like every single centralized streaming platform that's out there. In contrast, being able to like port your identity, your fan data, your music from like one platform to another through this unit of like it could be a crypto wallet, for example, is like an identity that can travel with you kind of across the across these like Web3 experiences. That's a very important part of the picture too.
Yes, thank you both so much. That was really, really interesting. And it's so great to hear more about you and your journeys as entrepreneurs and to learn a little bit more about what you do. I think both of your companies are so interesting. And yeah, look forward to learning more and watching your projects grow, and hopefully, you know, we can all work together again in some capacity. And I just wanted to say as well, you know, like I'm so grateful. I know I've said it a lot. I'm so grateful that you could be here today. I think it's so important that people at all levels in their career in the industry have the opportunity to hear from people with different perspectives. And I really appreciate it that you shared so openly and honestly and dove deep, because to me that helps like kick the doors down for some people, and that's really what we're all about. MMF is kicking down the doors. So thank you very much. So thank you, Cherie, and thank you, Kristin.
Thank you, and yeah, thanks so much, everyone. It was great.